If you are new to Magic the Gathering, specifically in Commander, and you happen to buy this Commander deck, this video will be directed towards you. So this is going to be a quick playthrough of how this deck works. Also some of the keywords in it. There'll be such things as clue tokens, counters, no max hand size, scrying, and we're going to showcase all of that in a basic how to play this deck. So let's get started with shuffling. So for shuffling, I can take like a fourth of the deck, fold it into each other like that. Just a relaxed hand. And if you aren't still sure how to shuffle, you can try doing one of these. That can be pretty helpful, but I enjoy splitting in half like that. I recommend to shuffle your deck around 7 times. That gives it a good randomization to it, and I always offer to have the deck cut, so we'll do that as well. All right, now that we have our commander, we have our tokens off to the side, we have our deck. Let's play through what it would be like when starting this game. So if we were to draw 7 cards, we have 7 cards, so we have no lands in hand. So what we do in this situation is we would put all of our deck back together, shuffle it, and this is called a mulligan because we want lands in our hand to start the game. So we shuffled, we'll split it in half, we'll draw 7. So we have 4 plus 3. So now we at least have 2 lands, so we'll try it. Now we won't be able to cast our commander as of right now because we don't have a white land or a plains to be able to cast Morska. So we'll just play it out, we'll see how it goes. So we have our 7 cards. Let's see what we have. So I'm going to assume we are the first player in our commander game, so we would be the first to draw, assuming there's 4 players. So we will go to draw. We got a forest. So I'm going to play an island this turn, and we will pass the turn. Once it's our turn again, we will draw. This will be our second turn. I'll have a dice to show you what we're at. Let's play a forest this time, so we have 2 mana. We can play an Erdwall Illuminator. So what we do is we put that on the table, and we can tap our mana to symbolize we're paying it. And this is a creature. It has a 1 and a blue, which means we have to pay 2 mana, but one of them has to be blue, so that's why we have the island tapped to represent that. This has flying, it's a 1/3, and whenever we investigate the first time each turn, we get to investigate an additional time. And so after that, we'll pass the turn. It comes our turn again. This will be our 3rd turn, and we'll untap. We'll go to draw a card, and we still don't have any white mana or any plains, so we'll just play a forest here. See what we can play, and right now we're not able to play anything. So in this scenario, we could now tap our creature to attack one of our opponents, and we could deal them 1 damage. And let's say it goes all the way back to our turn again. This would be our 4th turn, and after that we get to untap and we get to draw. So we have an island, and I think we should play either an Ethereal Investigator or a Teferi's Ageless Insight. But the issue is we're not drawing a lot of cards right now, so I could see us casting this later. And when this enters the battlefield, we get that many clue tokens, and we get to investigate, which means we get to do it in additional time, which would be really good. So I think we're going to do this card right here. This is Ethereal Investigator, so we have to tap at least 1 blue mana, so we got that, and then 3 of whatever color. So we have that. And this also is flying. It's a 2/3. When it enters the battlefield, we're going to investigate X times, where X is the number of opponents we have. So I'm going to assume we have 3 opponents. So we can grab a clue token and put a representation die, as there are 3 clue tokens right there. And when we draw our second card each turn, we get to create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. And we have tokens to represent that off camera. So we don't have any mana to spend to sacrifice these clue tokens, so we're just going to pass the turn. We'll go into our next turn. We will untap our lands or any other cards that are tapped, and we will draw for turn. It is an Academy Manufactor. Still no white mana, so I'm going to attempt to... So I did miss a trigger, actually. When we investigated, for the first time, we get to do it an additional time. So we actually would have had 4 clue tokens. So let's do an Academy. No, we'll try a Teferi's Ageless Insight. That way when we're drawing cards off of our clue tokens, we get to do an additional card, which would be helpful. We get to draw an additional card. So let's do that, and that would be our turn. So we're going to go to our next turn, turn 6. We would untap our lands. So if you would draw except the first one you draw in each of your draw steps, draw 2 cards instead. So we're drawing our first card so we don't get an additional card. We got an Innocuous Researcher. So this, when it attacks, each player is going to reveal the top card, and for each non-land card, we get to investigate, and each player draws after that. At the beginning of our end step, you can untap your lands, and if you do, you can't cast spells until your next turn. So I'm going to attempt to pay 2, and we're going to sacrifice 1 clue token. So that means after we've paid 2 mana, we're going to sacrifice one of our clue tokens, and we get to draw a card. Since it's not our first card we're drawing, we get to draw 2. So we have Coma, Cosmos, Serpent, and Tezzeret, Betrayer of Flesh. We're going to do that once more. I really think we can get a Plains, hopefully, so we're going to do that. We're going to crack or sacrifice a clue token and draw 2. So we did get a Lonely Sandbar. When we play that land, we get to play 1 each turn unless something tells us otherwise. This enters the battlefield tapped, so it will be tapped. So we can't use that right now. So we'll go to our next turn, going to turn 7 and untap. After that, let's go to draw our card. We did have more than 7, so let's discard. I'm going to discard a board wipe, and it's nicknamed a board wipe because it's a destroy all creatures, or destroy all would be referenced as a board wipe. And we'll also get rid of a mechanized production. This is a win con for the deck. This is how you win the game. But in this scenario, we're just displaying what this deck can do. So we've untapped, got our 7th turn counter ready. Let's draw our first card. It is a Jor-El Manvuli Recluse. Still no white mana, but let's try one more time. Tapping 2 to sacrifice this. We'll draw 2 cards. Let's do Academy Manufactor just to get some cards out, because we're going to have to start discarding. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's get rid of this board wipe and Finale of Revelation. Let's go to our next turn, turn 8. We've untapped. We'll draw our first card. It is a Lonus Cryptozoologist. So we'll try our luck again. We'll try to crack or sacrifice this final clue, and we'll tap for 2 to draw 2 cards, and we finally get access to white mana with the Talisman of Unity. So we're going to play that. Tapping 2, and now we can tap this for a green or white mana, and it deals 1 damage to us. We can't, or we could use it. We'll just tap for a green and a colorless, since we don't need that white mana or green. Play a Jor-El Manvuli Recluse. Whenever we draw our second card each turn, we get a 2/2 green cat. We can also pay 4 mana and 2 green, so 6 total. And until end of turn, creatures we control have base power and toughness, where X is the number of cards in our hand, which works really well with our commander because it gives us no max hand size, because normally you only have 7 cards that you can hold in your hand. So when I go to my end step now, I'm going to have to keep discarding. I'll discard an Innocuous Researcher. I will untap, go to turn 9, and I'll go to draw 1 card, and it's a forest. Let's play that forest. So right now we have 6 lands and 1 mana rock. That is just a reference to an artifact that can tap for mana. So we can have a total of 7 mana. And I really want to cast our commander because we can start getting more clue tokens at our upkeep, and that will be very helpful. So I think that is what we should do. So I'll tap a forest, an island, and I'll tap this for 1 white, so we would take damage. I'll grab this right here to represent our health. So let's go to 39 and set that right here. we're able to now cast our commander for 3 mana. So now we have no max hand size, so that means we don't have to keep discarding when we get over 7 cards. At our end step, we can still discard, but just we don't have to go down to 7 at our end step. At the beginning of our upkeep, we're going to investigate, which means we get more of these clue tokens, which is going to be really great with all of these right here. We have actually been missing the triggers from Ethereal Investigator, because when we draw our second card each turn, we get a 1/1 white spirit creature token. So I'm going to try to do my best to remember that. This deck has a lot of what we call triggers. So that is when or whenever. So for example, it says whenever you investigate, whenever you draw your second card, whenever you draw your second card, or if you would draw a card, if you would create a clue, etc. So I'm going to do my best to remember that. This deck can get a little overwhelming with all of the triggers that you have to remember. Also, our commander says whenever you draw your second card each turn, you put 2 +1/+1 counters on Morska. We've cast our commander. Let's see what else we can do. I think it would be really fun to play Tezzeret, Betrayer of Flesh, because it says the first activated ability of an artifact you activate each turn costs 2 less to activate. And that means our clue tokens will only have to be sacrificed, and we just get to draw a card, potentially 2, when we have Teferi's Ageless Insight out, which is a legendary enchantment. And we can also use our Planeswalker immediately, so we can draw 2, discard 2 unless we discard an artifact card, which I think is what we'll do. I think that is really powerful in this deck. So it starts at 4 loyalty and it gets +1, so this would go to a 5. So it says draw 2 cards, then discard unless you discard an artifact. We have a lot of triggers whenever we draw our second card each turn, so I'm going to do my best to keep track of that, going from left to right and then to the second row here. We're going to draw 2 cards, but whenever we draw our second card each turn, we're going to create a 2/2 green cat creature token. So we get a 2/2 green cat creature token from Jarrell. Whenever we draw, except the first card each turn, we draw 2 instead. So we're actually going to draw 4 cards off of Tezzeret's +1 ability. So we will draw 4. So we have 4 cards here. And this says when we draw our second card each turn, we put 2 +1/+1 counters on that. And now we have to discard 2 cards unless we discard an artifact, which we'll do that. We'll discard Magnifying Glass, so we just have to discard that 1 card here. And now we finally have a Plains, which is going to be really helpful. I think we did play a land this turn, so I won't put that down this turn. And after that, we'll go to our end step. And there aren't any triggers, I believe, so we will untap. And now we'll go to upkeep, which this says at the beginning of our upkeep, we're going to investigate, which is creating a clue token. And then this says whenever you investigate the first time, each turn you get to investigate an additional time. So that means we get 2 clue tokens just from our commanders at the beginning of upkeep. I did forget Ethereal Investigator because we drew more than 2 cards. So I'm going to try to remember that as well. So that was our upkeep. This says if you would create a clue, food, or treasure token, we're going to create 1 of each. We've created a clue token. We need to create a food and a treasure token because of Academy Manufactor. And now we're going to go to our draw step. So we're going to draw our card for turn, and we will put that in our hand. So let's play a Plains, which is going to be very helpful. I want to play a Benny Brack's Zoologist. So this says, at the beginning of each end step, if you created a token this turn, draw a card. And it also has Convoke, which says your creatures can help cast this, and each creature you tap while casting this pays for 1 colorless or 1 mana of that creature's color. So we could tap our commander here for a white mana. We can also tap Jarrell, Erdwall, Illuminator, and Ethereal Investigator, and we don't even have to tap our mana because we use the Convoke ability on this card. So we can just put that on our battlefield. And let's go to activate Teferi. We are on turn 10, by the way. So you can see how fast this can get out of hand, assuming we were to have all of the correct mana, which we did not, sadly. But we're going to use Teferi's +1, which is drawing 2 cards, then discard 2 unless we discard an artifact. So we have a lot of triggers, and I'm going to do my best to remember. So we're going to draw 2 cards, but whenever we draw our second each turn, this gets 2 counters. So we'll go to 4. We're going to create another cat token. So I'll put a die there to represent that there are 2 of them now. Whenever we draw our second card each turn, we'll get a 1/1 white spirit creature token. So now we have that. If we would draw a card, except the first one, we draw 2 instead, so we'll draw 4. And I believe that is all of our triggers. So we have 4, and if we don't discard an artifact, which we don't have any, we'll have to discard 2. So I think we will discard Spire of Industry, and we'll discard a Simic Growth Chamber. What do we want to do with this turn? I'm thinking we use Teferi's passive, which is just to not have to pay 2 for the first artifact ability. So I think we'll do that. We'll just won't pay 2. We'll sacrifice this and draw a card, which we're actually drawing 2 cards. We'll get a Plains and Adrix and Nev, and there shouldn't be any triggered abilities off of that. So we'll just draw 2. Let's play an Adrix and Nev Twin Casters. This is very powerful. We'll play that up here for, we'll just do it for at least a green and a blue, but we'll just tap 2 island and 2 forests right there. I did want to note that Lonely Sandbar is not an island, but you can tap it to get 1 blue mana. So Adrix and Nev has Ward 2, which means whenever this is targeted by a spell or an ability of an opponent, it gets countered unless they pay an additional 2 mana. If 1 or more tokens would be created under your control, twice that many of those tokens are created instead. This will get out of hand, and it's going to be fun to keep track of. So we have 4 mana. Additionally, a treasure token that taps for any 1 color. We have to tap it and sacrifice it, so we potentially have 5 mana to use here. So let's cast a Lonus Cryptozoologist for a green and a blue. Just 2 mana. Now we have 3 mana to spend. Let's cast an Ongoing Investigation for a blue, so we'll have to sacrifice this, and we'll just tap for 1 colorless or whatever color we want. We're tapping for white, but it's paying for that colorless mana. This says whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, investigate. And we can also pay 1 and a green to exile a creature card from our graveyard and investigate. So I'm going to now organize my battlefield to get a better idea of what's going on here. So I'm going to put all my creatures up here. So here's a little bit of a better idea of what's going on. I have a lot of things on the board, but we can adjust it whenever we go to our next turn. So we're going to go to our end step, and at the beginning of each end step, if we create a token, we get to draw a card, which is actually going to be 2 cards because of Teferi's Ageless Insight. So we'll draw at our end step for 2, getting a Shimmer Dragon and Merchant of Truth, and those will go to our hand. Everybody will take their turn. Going to our turn, it's going to be turn 11. We will untap our cards. Upkeep, we have our commander's trigger, which is to investigate. So we would create 1 clue token, but we get to investigate an additional time, which would go to 3. But this says if 1 or more tokens would be created under our control, we create twice that many. So I believe we would go from 3 to 5. And since we created that many tokens, or that many clue tokens, we're creating that many food and treasure tokens. So I believe our food would go to 5, and we would get 4 treasure tokens. And the math gets a little crazy because there's so many things that are happening. So we're just going to do our best. So that was our upkeep. We're going to draw for our turn. And we got an Arcane Signet, which will be good. Help us with our mana. And let's see what we want to do. So whenever 1 or more creatures deal combat damage, we get to investigate. We could play a Coma, Cosmos Serpent, and get a lot more tokens with Adrix and Nev. We could Ultimate Tezzeret, which is, this would remove him or destroy him and put him in our graveyard. But it says whenever we tap an artifact that we control, we get to draw a card. There's a lot of good things we could be doing. I think the right move is to play a Plains. We would play a Hornet Queen, for example. Not what I was anticipating, but Adrix and Nev can work with that. So we would tap at least 3 green mana and tap 4 mana for the whatever color we wanted to right here. And so that would be 7 mana total. And so originally this enters with 4 1/1 green insect creature tokens. which is somewhere hidden underneath one of our other tokens here. So right here. So we'll find another clue token. So we don't have another clue token, but we can use this as one, and we had 5 of those. We'll get 8 insects. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield, we're going to investigate. So we're going to go to 6 clues. Whenever we make a clue token, we're going to create an additional food and a treasure. But whenever we create a token, we're going to do twice that many. So we're going to go to 6. This will go to 7. Okay, I think we are caught up with what we need to do. We have not drawn a second card, so we're still good on that. But this is just an example of what this deck can do. I hope this video has been helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.